Well, we have a 2012 Honda CR-V and the ignition key won't turn in the lock. I suspect one of the tumblers is bent. You can put the key in, but you can't turn it. And the steering is turned slightly, so I started to try to disassemble the plastic covers here. And fortunately, I could get this top screw here, but this screw is not accessible unless I can get in. No. Got to pull the steering wheel off, I believe. I wonder how this airbag comes out of here. I'm going to try to, with a bit, to get that one screw out of there. This one here. Oh, you can't see it. There it is. If you could turn the wheel, but the wheel is locked. So there's a little access cover, just happens to be at this 9 o'clock position. Fortunately, normally you'd be at the bottom. And underneath there is the airbag connector and the horn connector. Then there are two T30 bolts that hold the airbag in. So it should come out of here now. Oh, and by the way, disconnect the negative battery post. I don't think there's any other additional wires. I need two hands. So there's a 14 millimeter headed bolt that holds the steering wheel, and then you need to use a puller. I've got this little puller kit that I've had for 100 years. 8mm bolts. Put the bolt back in and leave it about a 1/4 inch loose, because you got to push on the bolt. Not very tight. Not like that Dodge Ram I had the other day. Now I marked the steering wheel to the spline because I'm not sure if there's a master spline in here. And I've disconnected the electrical connector for the steering wheel controls. And got to feed the clock spring wires through. I don't see a master spline on here, so it's a good thing I marked it. Wow. Well, I put a mark. Actually, there is a factory mark. There's a little dimple, and there is a little mark right in the steering wheel right there. Okay, now we can get this plastic off. I couldn't get this screw with a bit. Gotta take this trim off. And what if I tilt the steering up? Well, there's a harness or something catching back here. I gotta get underneath the dash. So that multifunction switch and clock spring assembly comes off. There are 3 screws, 1, 2 facing you, and 1 from the top down. If you extend the steering column up as far as it'll go and tilt it down, it makes it a little easier. And then there are several connectors, as you can see. They're mostly Now this looks like it's just clipped on here. This, yeah, it's clipped here and clipped here. So I can't figure out how to get this ring off of this lock cylinder here. I know there's a roll pin right here, and these bolts that hold this assembly onto the steering column are break-off bolts. They look like rivets, but they're actually bolts, and they're left-hand thread to boot. So I think I'm going to get a cold chisel and try and loosen these two bolts and take this whole assembly off and bring it in the shop where I can work on it. So I used a small chisel. Remember, they're left-hand threads, so you got to pretend you're tightening them and to loosen them. Once they crack loose, they turn pretty easy. So once that comes off, there's a couple of clips. There's a screw down here that you can't get at from, it's facing the dash. Maybe if I'd seen it, I didn't see it because the harness was right over top of it. But I saw these two clips and I was prying up on these two clips, but I didn't want to break them. So there's a little light reflector ring and then some kind of other little circuit board here, and they just pop off the end. Now there's that roll pin that I researched. That's got to be pulled out. Now there's somebody that makes a little special tool for it. That's pretty tiny. I don't think it's that tight. So I elected to take this whole assembly to a locksmith. I took it to Butch's Lock Service in Thunder Bay. Excellent guy. And he fixed it up for me. I didn't want to deal with that little roll pin and the multiple tumblers inside there. Now I'm reusing these retaining bolts, and I've cut a slot in the head of the bolt with a zip cut blade, and I'm going to put a little tiny bit of Loctite on them just to secure them in place. And we're going to put the steering column back together. So there's the lock cylinder reinstalled, and the clock springs signal light multifunction switch installed. 3 screws, 3 Phillips head screws, one going down from the top. Make sure all the connectors are plugged in. Now we're going to fish this bottom cover on and reattach it. And I put the clock spring back on in exactly where it was. I didn't turn the steering wheel. I haven't unlocked it yet. So there it is, all back together again. Starts and runs. Key turns off, key comes out. Now he has this gray key here. I wonder if that's a valet key. Let's see if it'll start with that key. I guess that's a key without a remote on it. But they both work, so we'll call this one fixed.